Let's talk about puppet masters. I don't believe you don't know what I mean. If you're interested enough to watch these videos, you have already run into that term and you already understand what I mean. You probably even know some of the names. I'm not going to include those things. That information's out there. It's obvious. And I just want to talk about a shadowy group, rather than a bunch of individual persons exactly. I want to talk about a profile. Now, something we need to understand about this class of people who obviously feel entitled to rule the rest of us and to compete with each other to see who's more whatever. They're playing a very long game. This is a game of centuries and generations. This is a game that was begun in the industrial age. When the industrial age first began and created its first nouveau riche and ennobled its first nobleman, or not ennobled, enabled some of the noblemen to become very wealthy. There was a period between, the classic age of nobility and the industrial age when things kind of got rough for the nobility. See, the king had given sweeping new rights and permissions to citizens, ordinary people. He had turned them from virtual slaves to persons who could say, "No, I don't want to." And this was creating a problem for the nobility, who were traditionally wealthy because of the people they controlled. If their villages were happy and productive, then the nobleman was wealthy. He had a huge supply of human beings on whom to call if he wanted workers, sex workers, army, cannon fodder, or to bring some brilliant young fellow up the ranks to create more of himself. I don't know, but you know what I'm saying. They had this beautiful pool, and so it was, when you had a sadistic, narcissistic one, things went downhill. But for the most part, it generally worked out okay because it was in his best interest to take care of them. And there was a duty of care back and forth. And the only reason you really had a nobleman in the peasant's mind was that he was the guy that could equip an army. And the army could protect your fields and your crops and your children and your wives. And so they all cooperated. And well, this had gone downhill since the king had said, that power gets abused. We're going to change the dynamics. And the Magna Carta was created, and Parliament was created, and people acquired more rights, and nobility lost a lot of power. So when the industrial age came along and nobility was able to build factories and cottages right on their land and trap people into a cycle of working for a living and never having enough money to finish paying for that living. So you were charged for everything that you needed to survive was now provided and taken off your wages. And your wages were wholly inadequate to the task of even keeping up, much less bettering yourself or even recovering when you're ill or being ill or having a life outside of work. It was once again slavery, but this time by the numbers. And they had a grand old time getting rich off of these people, because at some point they would be so deep in debt, they just didn't have a choice. They simply didn't have a choice when they were told what to do, when to do it, how to do it, where to do it, and when to get up, when to go to bed, and eat what's put in front of you and wear what's shoved in your face. And you're even told when you're going to the bathroom. Doesn't matter how bad your bladder's groaning. Doesn't matter if you wind up sitting in a puddle of your own urine. You wait until it's time, like a dog. So that was the industrial age. That was a beautiful time for wealthy. Anybody who could put a stake together and build a factory with cottages out back could suddenly entrap an entire population to use as he wanted. And that was great. And that caused a lot of immigration because a lot of people were like, I got to get out of this place, man. I hear the West. The West is wide open. You could buy land. You could become a landowner. You can just farm. Because a lot of these people had farming roots before they got trapped in the mills, Before that, they basically grew their own food, made their own clothes, built their own homes, built their own beds. You made your bed, you lie in it. That was truth. And they were only beholden to the Lord because they needed two things from the Lord. They needed the security of a large protected larder where the food would be redistributed, in theory, from the Lord's castle. And in the early days, in some places, this is exactly how it worked, and this is how it was supposed to work, and in fairy tales it worked this way. The guy in the big house had a huge warehouse where your grain tithes had been going all of this time, and he was free to use that for his own household use. But in times of trouble, he was supposed to parcel it out at the gate. You were supposed to be able to go knock, knock, knock. Please, Lord, we have no food. Give us food. And he would dole out a daily portion or a weekly portion or however that worked out for the community. That was the idea behind it. Don't get me started on how well it actually worked. But now we had a different system, and there's a song called 16 Tons. You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. Say, Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to the company store. I love that song. So anyways, I owe my soul to the company store. That is it in a nutshell. That is what they did. You became indebted so deeply to the company store that you simply couldn't quit working. And when you died, the debt was passed on to your family, your dependents. They would say, well, your kids have to work now to pay off your debt. I mean, and they just tied up these illiterate people, these illiterate, ignorant, uneducated people. And then they started the public schools in those factories. The public schools were started for the purpose of educating people so that they could do a better job in the factories. And there was a whole lot of bleeding hearts by now because literacy had increased. There was a lot more opportunity for people to think for themselves and to read things from other places and to develop a higher consciousness. And those people were beginning to meddle in the factory system because the suffering there was so severe. It couldn't escape the attention of the bleeding hearts, the social justice warriors. And they always giving a damn about the weak and the oppressed. My God. You know what I'm saying? These people were just poured on in there going like, this child has lost her arm and she's dying of gangrene because you didn't want to pay for a doctor, because you made her reach into a moving machine, because you were too cheap to stop it long enough for her to grab the thread. This sort of thing was going on. And little children were working and becoming maimed and injured and ill, and people were not really surviving very long, and it was a terrible, terrible thing. And so the bleeding heart started stepping in, but it wasn't only that changed it. That was part of it, but part of the way they stepped in was they unionized the workers. I mean, it didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen easily, but the outcome was unions. Unions came along. Now, unions are directly opposed to the rich man's ideals. They had to infiltrate and corrupt the unions to break them. And today, I would say most unions are nearly broken because they've been corrupted. I certainly think that the United Auto Workers Union got heavily corrupted in the 80s. A lot of unions have people at the top that are probably there to make the union unreasonable so that people will sort of lose favor and sympathy and power. And so there's these people that have been wealthy since the beginning of the industrial age who have been engineering all kinds of different social scenarios, from their encapsulated little cities in a brick building with factories and homes and everything supplied, right down to the modern age where you've got the Edward Scissorhands suburb where everybody does as they're told. And they all make it look like it's a cheerful thing to do. And now we have a really interesting situation. The entire flippin' globe is under house arrest, kind of, more or less, to varying degrees. And shortages. The goods upon which we rely are not being supplied at the usual rate. Because what's better than getting money by selling stuff to consumers? Getting money without having to sell stuff to consumers. Because where's the money coming from? Well, at the moment, it's coming from the World Bank, banks in general. It's being, in other words, made up out of thin air. And then it's, well, I haven't seen anyone handed any money yet. They're talking about it, but I haven't seen it. And I'm still thinking that it's going to only touch about, a percentage of the working population. I think that there are going to be people who lose their income and do not qualify. I think we're going to be one of them, frankly. It's hard to just sit and watch because I am involved. Plus which, of course, with all of my coughing and sneezing and allergies and my hoarse voice and my hot flashes, I'm always wondering, what if I've got it? Am I going to die? What if one of my other health problems crops up? I don't want to go to the hospital. It's a tough one to be brave. And this virus thing is pretty freaky. And in fact, by the time that this video releases in 2 weeks, it's going to be a whole nother ballgame, isn't it? And I don't know where it's going to be. And I don't even like thinking even so much as a week in advance. And that's what the rich men want, you see. That's what our puppet masters are after. Right now, they've got us all on tenterhooks. We're all tense as tense gets. Those of us who can are panic shopping through delivery. Either you're buying pizzas, or you're ordering food, or you're ordering off Amazon, or you're ordering from your favorite website somewhere. You're all ordering stuff that can. I know you are. You're also paying for DLC, downloadable content on all your favorite games. You're like, well, they're promising to give us money, and they're giving us breaks on these bills, and I've got paid leave offs. A lot of you do have paid leave off, and so I can afford, you're thinking to yourself, because I'm not going to the restaurant this week, and you're spending a little extra. You think that's not part of the goal? And you're not spending it on the locals because you're afraid to go out. All of a sudden, they cut out all the bricks and mortar stores in town, didn't they? Yeah, where did your groceries come? Yeah, maybe your groceries came from one of them. It probably came from the biggest one in town. Mine did not, I would like to point out. I made a stop at the local co-op. And I picked up stuff from, they call themselves the Wandering Market. It's a farm to folk local food supply chain that is extremely short-chained, but they drive from one city to another. And I know they're being super cautious to avoid being vectors for infection. And I know the people well. I think they seem very, very on top together people. But anyways, it's possible we're all going to get it anyway, and we're all sitting there thinking that. It's like, I'm going to face it now or later. Just go ahead and get sick. Sorry, Grandpa. I don't have a grandpa. That kind of thing. Sorry, Mom. I know. I'm not really wanting to wish death on anyone in any form, no matter how I feel about people. Or whether I feel about them at all. Because, they care, they feel, they matter. Compassion recognizes that the existence of emotion justifies itself in terms of being heard. It does not justify itself in terms of being acted upon. Behavior is a separate thing from feeling. So, just because you're enraged doesn't mean you get to rage. It does mean you have to be able to stop and say, I'm enraged, and this is what I'm angry about. But human beings do generally tend to just lose their marbles when they get angry. Winnipeg and Regina in the early 20th century both had examples of that, where police and workers who wanted to unionize clashed. Now, the workers were striking. They were gathering in mass groups with signs, ready for anything. They brought their weapons, and they were going to communicate. Pardon me. No, it's allergies. They were going to communicate to both City Hall and their bosses. And they were mad as heck, and they weren't going to take it anymore. And they demanded to be heard as a group, to be recognized as a group, to be allowed to unionize. So, as governments tend to do, the poor aggrieved business owners whose property was being damaged got to call out the cops on them. We must quell these rioters, these rabble in the streets. And the upshot was that a lot of people on both sides died. A lot of damage was done to the city. A lot of grief. Big funerals, lots of them processions of many people. And this happened in Regina and Winnipeg in two separate incidents. And because of that, the business owners were brought to heel. The rich guys were brought to heel by the people's government, because in the long run, we're supposed to be a democracy. And that's where you have to ask yourself, does the system serve the king or the people? Are we here to serve our kings, these guys on leather sofas in their silk ties and their Brooks Brothers suits, or I don't even know what they wear. I don't mix with such people. I don't want to. I would rather mix with drug addicts than rich people, actually. At least with drug addicts, I know what to expect. I know where they're at. I know their level. I can, they're not complicated, and they're just going to steal my stuff. They're not going to steal my soul. So I stay the heck away from rich people. It's probably one reason I'm so bloody broke. Although I will work for them quite happily. I will happily work in their houses, painting beautiful things on their walls. If only I could get the jobs, but they already see me for who I am. So anyways, the point is that the puppet masters, they are well-educated people who have studied history as well, at least as well as me. I'm a well-educated person, but I'm not as well-educated as some of these wealthy people. They've gone to much better schools. They've had much more focused and curated educations. I didn't study history in school. I studied history to the extent that I was required as mandatory courses. And because of those mandatory courses, I got a basic sketch out. But at the time, I disliked it because it seemed mostly to be an issue of memorizing numbers. And the numbers didn't connect for me with time frames. But over the last 30 years or some since I left school, 30 years, I think, 40 years? Oh, time. Who cares? It's been a while. I've learned a lot about history, and it's become one of my favorite subjects. I've learned it by reading fiction, both about and from eras, and then looking up activities from the books in history books, because it's set in a time of historical upheaval. I mean, when you write a novel, you set it in a time of historical upheaval, whether it's the time that happened last year, like all of the novels about coronavirus that are going to come out next spring, or whether it's because you're remembering back to a very distant time. Either way, the author does the historical research and or is present during the history. And the consequence of that is that you get a really good, in-depth, movie quality look at life in those times and the attitudes of people in those times and the history of the time. And then when you turn around and you look it up and you match it up, okay, that's Charlemagne. Okay, that's what the Magna Carta is. Okay, these guys were these pirates that was actually, Queen Elizabeth was sending this guy out for this, and then you compare the politics and the wars, and all of a sudden you know history. And this is what these very wealthy people have. So they know what what happens when people truly riot. There's a point to which they can push us. But what's happening different now, they've pushed us well beyond a point that they could ever have pushed a population before. I don't think you could ever have made a group of people stay home the way you can this now. One of the differences is the internet making it possible for us to keep connecting like this. Oh, I hate all this coughing I'm doing. One of the, we're connecting through the internet. It's allowing a lot of people to work from home, especially the ones that are keeping the money moving. That matters. But money can be done digitally now. So there's this whole different cast. And not only that, but the population itself, people are different now. We're different in a variety of ways. We're different in our outlooks. We're different in our compassion level. We're different in our understanding, our literacy. There's just, and how we want to present ourselves. I no longer get hassled for dressing like with all of these colors. And I used to. I don't anymore. In fact, I get praised. That's one example. So yeah, things have changed, and it feels like the puppet masters, whether or not this is engineered, they are certainly sitting back, seeing how far they can push it. Where's the line these days? How far can you push the envelope? How long can you keep people in their houses? How long can you control them to that extent? And to what level can you control them? And what can you do to them if they leave their houses? How can you push the population to support that? Can you scare people so bad? I think it was General Motors or Ford. It was a vehicle assembly plant where a worker vomited, as people will sometimes do. Bad lunch, maybe pregnant, maybe got queasy, maybe too stressed. There's a lot of reasons to vomit, and COVID-19 is not one of them. However, the entire factory fled in panic. They self-evacuated the entire damn thing from the ground zero point all the way out, like manager hits the fire alarm level. Everybody got the heck out. While some poor janitor was left to clean up the puddle with sawdust and Lyco. It's just vomit. But it's not funny. It's terrifying. I could be out there one day in a grocery store and go, and all of a sudden everybody starts acting like an anthill got disturbed. It wouldn't really put a hitch on my grocery shopping. And I could be hollering, no, I promise it's allergies. It's one of the reasons why I wear a lot. I wear a scarf up here, and I wear a veil down here, and I wear gloves, because I want people to feel like they're safe from me. Where are the puppet masters going to push us? They don't know. We don't know. They don't know. You don't know. You don't even know how far you can be pushed. I don't know. I still have it in my head that I'm going to head out on a camping trip once last frost. After, once it doesn't freeze overnight, I'm going to go camping. I want to go camping. And I'm still wondering, are they going to stop me that too? Because I could do that affordably enough that money's not going to stop me. But are they going to have police roaming the streets stopping everybody? I mean, if I'd used side roads instead of highways, couldn't I just go find a nice place to just get away from everyone and chill out with my pets? Don't know. And if I did, could I get home? So, good luck out there. Keep talking. And remember, decide where your line is. Draw a line. I want you to think about your line. Where's your line? And when you draw it, please stand on it firmly. If you can't exercise your legal rights as a citizen now, What good are they? Are they just there for show? When the rubber hits the road, that's what your Constitution is for. Or your Canadian Bill of Rights. That's what it's for, is right now. You are cooperating. As long as you feel like you're cooperating, your rights are not being abridged. But if you feel like you don't have a choice, but bam, your Constitution is in force, and you should fight back. Okay? I'm not telling you to riot. I'm telling you to draw a line and decide where your personal line is and have the courage to stand on it if you're pushed to it. And you will decide in your own homes what that looks like. Good luck.